The case I want to talk about today is that of Sam Cooke, a soul singer with a passion for political change who was horrifically murdered at the age of 33 in Los Angeles. Throughout his career, Sam released a lot of powerful songs, including Chain Gang and A Change Is Coming. I wanted you to read some of the lyrics from A Change Is Coming, so I'm putting them on the screen now. Sam was born in 1931 and spent his youth living through the Great Depression. I'm going to play a clip from an interview where he was asked about his upbringing.
As a minister, I started singing in the church naturally because I was exposed to gospel singing first, Mike. Came out of school, went with a professional gospel group called the Soul Stirrers, sang around the country with them for about 5 years. Decided to go on my own, made a song called You Send Me. It sold about 1.5 million copies for me, luckily enough.
Sam was born in the South during an extremely racist time, and there was still mass segregation, and it wasn't uncommon for him to see public lynchings of innocent black kids. And his dad wanted a better life for him and his family, obviously, and so they packed up and moved north to Chicago. After arriving in Chicago, Sam's father, Charles Cooke, started a church among 200 to 300 other successful black businesses between 43rd and 51st Street. Sam and his friends were known to sing at a lot of the churches, and people would come out just to see them perform. At the age of 19, Sam joined a gospel group called the Soul Stirrers and replaced Paul Foster as the lead vocalist. Sam would perform with the group from 1950 to 1956 before deciding to pursue his career as a solo artist. The Soul Stirrers would go on to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1989. Another remarkable thing about Sam Cooke is that he actually owns all of the masters to his music and even opened his own record company in 1961 that was called SAR Records, and it's actually debated what this stands for. And if you have heard what's going on with Kanye West right now on Twitter and his disclosure of his recording contracts, artists are very rarely able to own their masters, especially in the beginning. So this was very significant that Sam was able to own all the rights to his music back in the 60s. During this time, Sam began to focus his conversations on the racial injustice and discrimination that black people were facing in America. One incident that particularly affected Sam was in 1955 when a little boy named Emmett Till was accused of whistling at a white woman in a grocery store and subsequently beaten to death, violently killed. And information has surfaced in recent years where the woman who accused Emmett of whistling at her was interviewed by the author of the book The Blood of Emmett Till and admitted to lying about her encounter with the young boy. So an innocent child was killed over a lie that a grown woman told. I'm not going to be putting the images of Emmett on screen, but I recommend looking them up because as difficult as they are to look at, Imagine his family having to see him like that in person and knowing that their child was killed because of the color of his skin. We are still seeing racially motivated crimes happen today, and I think Sam would be disappointed that 56 years after his death, our country is still dealing with this problem. It was sad to me that Sam was so affected by Emmett's death and then would later die in very similar circumstances, but we'll get into that later. As Sam's career in music began to flourish, he became friends with Malcolm X and a man named Cassius Clay, who we now know as Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, Sam Cooke, Malcolm X, Jim Brown, and many others were all leaders to the American people and were speaking out against the corruption of those in power in this country, and because of this were viewed as a threat by the FBI. Within just 1 year, both Sam Cooke and Malcolm X would be murdered, and Muhammad Ali would be left to fight for justice on his own. Malcolm X once told reporters, "I live like a man who is dead already," and on February 21st, 1965, he was assassinated in Washington Heights. I think most of us are familiar with the death of Malcolm X, but another heartbreaking murder that was not as highly publicized occurred just 1 year earlier in 1964 in Los Angeles, and that is the murder of Sam Cooke. On the evening of December 10th, Sam went to dinner with two friends at Martoni's Italian restaurant where he caught the eye of a young woman named Elisa Boyer. Elisa was sitting at a booth with three other men, one of which being a guitar player who was an acquaintance of Sam Cooke and who introduced the two after noticing Elisa's interest in the singer. After spending the evening getting to know one another, the two decided to head to the Motel Hacienda and stay the night. However, the night took a turn for the worse, and by the end of the evening, Sam Cooke would be dead. At this point, it's important for you to know that Elisa Boyer was a sex worker, and this was not known to Sam at the time or most people because she wasn't volunteering this information, but we will find out later how this information came to light. The events that follow have been highly debated, but it is known that Elisa Boyer and Bertha Franklin, the manager of the Hacienda Motel, were acquainted with one another. Elisa claims that they went into a motel room and Sam began undressing himself and her and then went into the bathroom, and she felt as though he was going to return and rape her, so she decided to steal his pants and run out of the room and jump into a car, which was later discovered to be driven by her pimp. Sam was known to carry anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 in cash on him. It's thought that Lisa could have seen the wad of cash he had on him earlier in the night and stole his pants as a means to get to his wallet. Upon returning from the bathroom, Sam left and was knocking apparently aggressively on Bertha Franklin, the manager's door. I'm assuming because Elisa stole his pants and was requesting to know where the young woman went. Bertha then says that Sam enters her office and attacks her, and so she proceeds to shoot him 3 times and he collapses. Because of Bertha's story and what Elisa was claiming, Sam's death was ruled justifiable homicide by reason of self-defense. And I haven't seen anywhere why this woman just had a gun sitting around. On December 18, 1964, Sam was placed in a glass-covered casket where over 200,000 people came to view him before his funeral. Exactly 1 month after Sam's death, on January 11, 1965, Elisa was arrested for prostitution after agreeing over the phone to have sex with an undercover cop for $40. I don't think anyone is really questioning if Bertha killed Sam. I think the speculation is surrounding her motivations. There are three main theories that I'm going to be touching on, but there are many others online. I'm just going to be covering the ones I thought were most plausible and the ones that I kept seeing come up while I was researching this case. One theory is that the mafia was involved somehow, and this comes about because before Sam's death, he was approached by members of the Italian mob who wanted a piece of his record business and he declined, and some people think this could have been a reason for them to retaliate. Another aspect of this theory that I've seen mentioned is that Sam could have been targeted by music industry executives with ties to the mob because he spoke out against how artists were being treated, and he was very vocal about his belief that musicians should have more rights over their music. Another theory that I alluded to earlier in this video is that the FBI was somehow involved in Sam's death. The FBI was watching Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X, but I couldn't confirm if they were watching Sam Cooke. However, it's widely believed that they were, but the only way for this theory to make any sense is if they somehow coerced Bertha to shoot Sam, which is possible but unlikely. And this brings us to our last theory, which is that Elisa and Bertha had planned on killing Sam that night, probably for money. And I tend to believe this theory more than the others because after watching the recording of the coroner's inquest, where Elisa was asked to testify, she seemed like she was really up to something, and I left with the opinion that these guys I think up here had too. There was absolutely no physical evidence indicating that Sam had ever touched Bertha, let alone attacked her, or Elisa for that matter, and soul singer Etta James talked about how Sam looked beaten, severely beaten, at his funeral, which is contradictory to what authorities released, saying that Bertha had just gotten a scuffle with Sam before shooting him. During a radio broadcast, Muhammad Ali was asked about Sam's death, and he responded by saying, "I don't like the way he was shot. I don't like the way it was investigated. If Cooke had been Frank Sinatra, the Beatles, or Ricky Nelson, the FBI would be investigating yet, and that woman would have been sent to prison." In this video, I tried to go over a lot of the important moments leading up to Sam's death, but he did so many cool things throughout his life, so I recommend watching the Netflix documentary, The Two Deaths of Sam Cooke, because it touches on the media coverage and how disrespectful they were to his memory and to his family. That brings us to the end of this video. I really enjoyed researching Sam's life. He seemed like such an inspirational person, and it's heartbreaking what happened to him. But if you did enjoy the video, I would appreciate subscribing or leaving a comment down below.